charger.
Are you serious?
Good evening, and welcome 1 minute early to the Zoning and Design Review Board for Tuesday, April 14th. And I will now call this meeting to order and ask for the roll call of the commissioners.
Great. Member Janes?
Here.
Member Lass?
Here.
Member Cook?
Here.
Vice Chair Scoggins?
Here.
Chair Durham?
Here.
Let the record show that everyone is present.
And we will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Any changes from any of the commissioners for the agenda this evening, or any concerns or questions? Seeing none, shall we move to adopt tonight's agenda?
Moved.
A second?
I'll second.
Very good. Commissioner Cook, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous, and we will move on to the approval of minutes. First one will be February 10th, which was all of us except for member Jason Janes. Did anybody have any questions about those or any changes? Someone move to accept those?
I'll move.
In a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous, and we will move to the minutes of March 10th as well. Vice Chair Scoggins was absent, so anybody have any questions or concerns about those? A motion to accept those?
I'll move to accept.
Very good. In a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. That passed unanimously as well. Is there anybody in the audience this evening who would like to speak to something that is not any discussion on the agenda for this evening? Very good. Seeing none, we will move to the consent calendar, which there is none. And
Durham,
yes.
if I may, for the February 10th minutes, please note I neither voted to approve nor disapprove. the
Oh,
minutes.
sorry.
Not present.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you. Oh, correct. Thank you. Very good. And with that, we will move into the public hearings. And the first one will be for Jefferson Street, which I will need to recuse myself. So Vice Chair Scoggins will take over for this part of the meeting.
Thank you. So I guess we'll start off with the staff report.
Great. Well, good evening, board members. Before you tonight is an application for design review for a remodel of an existing residence at 6639 Jefferson Street. It's located in the Old Town Historic District. The subject parcel is about 6,000 square foot site on the corner of Jefferson and Creek, butts up right next to Hopper Creek. The property is currently developed with the 638 square foot single story residence. In the application, the applicant proposes to remodel the existing interior of the residence, which was built in 1936, while retaining the exterior footprint. All of the work being done will exist under the existing roof line of the main residence. The front door will remain on the Jefferson Street side of the property, with a wooden porch which wraps around the northeast corner of the house. The porch will be connected to a larger patio deck on the north side of the house, and it will be protected by wooden railing. The deck will also be accessible from the inside, from the kitchen, and will also have steps leading down into the yard. The proposed plan includes construction of a one-car garage with storage and laundry area on the west side of the lot facing Creek Street. An additional 148 square foot den area will also be constructed between the area of the garage and the main residence, as the elevation behind me shows, as well as the elevation shown in your packet. When staff performed analysis of the project, we came up with a few talking points. First, regarding historical significance of the home being built in 1936. A study was done by Page and Turnbull, dated February 24th of this year, And in the report, it was stated that the proposed project is sensitive to the character-defining historic features of the Old Town area and complies with the design guidelines outlined in the Yountville Municipal Code. Also included is the location to the creek. A setback line on both sides of Hopper Creek is required, which runs parallel and is measured 35 feet from the center line of the creek and not less than 10 feet from the creek bank. And the proposed drawings show that the proposed structure along with the deck conform to these standards. All of the proposed siding and roofing for the new garage and the den area have been submitted to match the already existing residence. All in all, staff has found that the proposed plans and drawings are consistent with the town's design standards, and it is consistent with the overall feel of that neighborhood of the Old Town Historic District. And so now staff is available for any questions.
Any questions from staff?
I have one. Wood shingles for the roof.
Correct.
There's no restrictions against using wood shingles?
It's matching, it's consistent with the requirements with Old Town Historic, and it's what's already there on the house, so there's no...
But they could use asphalt if they were re-roofing?
That could be a condition.
But there's no call for it? Okay.
Yeah, there's no call for that right now.
Okay, thank you.
In regard to attachment A, proposed conditions of approval, have these all been agreed to, or is this something, how are we looking at these?
The conditions of approval have been developed by staff, both in planning as well as public works and our engineering team. If approval is to be granted by the board, staff is recommending that it's adopting those same conditions.
And perhaps in the applicant's report, they can tell you whether or not they agree to all those
Right.
conditions.
Right.
And which have been shared with them previously.
Great. Well, I think we will, if no further questions of staff, great. We will hear from the applicant at this point.
The last time I did this, it looked different. It was quite a while ago. I'm here with the owner. My name is Bernice Nichols. I'm with Construction Design Consultants in Stockton. And I'm here with the owner, Mr. Kim, and the engineer, Doug Noteware. Mr. Kim was very adamant that this house, that his plans to remodel should meet all of the guidelines of your city. So he's very sensitive to that. And that's why we are matching the addition to the existing shingles, which is going to be quite a chore, by the way. But anyway, in keeping with that, we spent several visits up here, driving around, looking at the neighborhoods, looking at all the other houses, looking at the landscaping, making sure that we were sensitive, to the outlines that we were given and the parameters. And I hope that we met that goal.
Great.
And we're hoping for approval so that we can start our construction drawings and Mr. Kim can get the project underway. Are there any other questions? Okay.
Doesn't look like it.
No,
Any
I don't have any.
questions?
No.
There's lots of mature trees and, the landscaping is very natural and it's going to stay the way it is.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Except we're going to clean it up.
All right.
Thank you.
Great. Is there any public comment per the applicant? I'll take that as a no, and we will close public comment, and I think we'll go into any questions and discussion, I guess, amongst the board here.
I'll only note one thing. While I agree that the garage is exempt from FAR, I think it's important to note the reason it's exempt is that it's located in the rear half of the lot. As written in the staff report, it just says it is exempt without defining why. And I think that's an important distinction.
That is correct, yeah.
Got it. You know, I apologize. I actually had one question of the applicant, which was my earlier question to you folks. Was there any questions or concerns about the proposed conditions for approval that staff has shared with you prior? No. Okay, so you're in agreement with all of the conditions. Great. Excellent. Anyone else for discussion or questions?
Oh, I think they've done a very nice job of planning for remodel and keeping it in the flavor of Old Town. I think it's very well done. No.
Great. Well, since there's no more questions, can I ask for a motion to approve with the proposed conditions as staff has outlined to move forward with this project?
Let me do that. I will make a motion to approve the project with the attachment A
A.
of the conditions.
Second.
Good enough? Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously.
Unanimous.
Nice
welcome.
job.
A long drive for a short meeting. Thank you very much.
I didn't have.
Yeah.
I didn't have the attachment. I didn't either. Okay. Are there RH things in there that we haven't seen? This is new too. Yeah, but the rest of it, have we seen it? There's some light in this stuff.
I can give up a second.
No, it's fine. He just didn't close the public hearing, so just make sure you do that.
Okay. Did I leave something out?
I'll try.
Just close it. That's all right. That's all right. That was the quickest close I've ever seen. So with that, I will, I
Nicely
wasn't even prepared. I was down the hall. So with that, we will close the public hearing on number 8 and move to, for Jefferson Street, excuse me, we'll close it. And,
That's okay. No.
no,
this
she
is
just
what it
stepped
is.
out for, I just want to make sure.
Oh.
And then we will move into the RH Gallery Master Development and Signage Plan and Use Permit. And we'll start with the staff report.
Thank you, board members. I'm Marlene Demery. I'm the interim planning and building director, serving while Sandra is on her leave. And tonight we have before you a project that has actually been in the works quite a long time, even though it is finally coming to you. We received the application after many discussions with RH Galleries. The subject parcel is a 22,500 square foot parcel located on North Washington Street in the Old Town Commercial District area. The parcel is currently vacant, but it was historically developed as a restaurant, and it's located between Masonry and North Block Hotel. The site plan for the project provides for a one-way driveway on the north side of the project site, immediately adjacent to North Block Hotel. The parcel is bordered by commercial uses. On the west side of the property abuts Highway 29, and across Washington Street there are commercial properties as well. The proposed project is comprised of the construction of 3 new structures arranged around a large courtyard. The front building is situated parallel to Washington Street, and the 2 rear buildings are oriented perpendicular to the street. RH Gallery is not a conventional restoration hardware store, but rather it's constructed as a curated wine and design center that features art, antiques, and distinctive home furnishings for use in the home and the garden. Limited food service is also being proposed with the project from the building fronting Washington Street, and they are pursuing a Type 41 ABC license so that food and wine beverages may be enjoyed throughout the complex. The total square footage of the buildings is just about 5,600 square feet, and the buildings surround a courtyard that is about 4,600 square feet. There's also a basement that's being constructed under the rear 2 structures and includes a gallery space where Food that is prepared elsewhere will be assembled and brought up to the restaurant, to the limited service restaurant in Building 1. The basement also includes storage and rooms for HVAC equipment and IT types of uses. One of the things I think that we're going to be talking about a little bit later is the association with the historic structure, and just so that the board is aware, RH has purchased the business at Masonry. They're not the underlying property owner, but they do own the business. And these two sites are going to be operated complementary. Masonry will continue with their wine service and small food service, but with the Type 41 license that is to be obtained for RH Galleries, that would allow the wine to actually come over onto this site and be enjoyed there. There are, of course, lots of goals and policies that we have in our general plan that establish design standards for construction of buildings, and the ZDRB, of course, is weighing in on the review of the design portions of the structure, not the uses. The uses are actually covered under a use permit that will be considered separately by the town council, who remains the authority on that area. So we're asking you mostly to concentrate on design tonight. I know that sometimes uses get involved somewhat, but as your board is aware, that's what your jurisdiction is. The intent of the municipal code establishes standards so that land use and classification of building types reflect the commercial beginnings of Yountville in the Old Town Commercial District. It's also intent of the classification is to promote an interesting, attractive environment for pedestrians and enhancing the interface between the commercial uses and the street. The buildings, you've got the site plan. You want to show the other one? Yeah. The buildings are designed around a common theme and feature custom plaster with stone accents that are complementary to masonry. It also includes metal, glass, and wood elements. All buildings include wood lintels and metal windows and doors. Metal trellis with textured glass will span the area between the entrance on Washington Street and the front door of Building 1. A non-contiguous short stone wall will along the Washington Street frontage will allow for the public to stroll into the site along the front patio. The main roof lines of the building feature gable forms, bronze-colored standing seam metal construction, and the pitches are 6 to 12. Building 1 will house the limited service restaurant as well as the gallery space, and the two rear buildings will be set up as design showcases. Several open spaces are proposed, including a central and west courtyard, and with fireplace feature, and the front yard courtyard with the textured glass trellis, as I mentioned earlier. The proposed site open space meets the 20% required in the zoning ordinance. The gallery, which fronts Washington Street, will be set back 12 feet from the property line, and the north setback will be 15 feet for the property line to Building 1. Building 3 is set back 18 feet from the north property line, and Building 2 abuts the masonry site. The project does include a one-way gate exit from the Burgundy subdivision along the rear of Masonry. The RH parking lot abuts that residential neighborhood. And there have been issues about privacy from the Burgundy Common subdivision. And so as part of this project, although not on the RH site itself, we've included a condition of approval to install a one-way gate exit from that area so that will protect that neighborhood from trucks, delivery trucks, and visitors from entering their subdivision. The landscape plan is classic Mediterranean, meets all of our standards. It's included in your packet. The site is required to have on-site biofiltration, and those areas are all accommodated on the landscaping plan that we've reviewed. A total of 2 6-inch diameter sycamore trees will be removed on the site and will be replaced with approximately 30 trees in the parking lot area, 8 in the central courtyard, and 2 in the front courtyard area. The applicant is proposing a total of 8 signs on site. 6 are located along the front of the project and are part of the master sign review plan. One sign is a metal sign with parking directional parking sign, and we're going to be asking you to look at that because the font size on the parking is quite small, and staff is concerned that it won't be visible from the street. So we're asking the board to weigh in on whether you believe that sign will work as it's intended or want to suggest anything different. The site will operate from 8 a.m. till 9 p.m., 7 days a week. All transactions made in the gallery will be made from a discrete stationary point of sale cabinet or a sales associate iPad. As such, all cash and carry sales, including furnishings, decor, and food and beverages, will be taxed locally. All sales shipped out of state will be taxed based on the customer's delivery destination. A lot of these things are furniture, so they're going to be delivered from another location. RH intends to hold up to 6 special events per year that will extend past the 9 p.m. closure. Staff has suggested some conditions of approval on size and duration of those events in keeping with the North Block transient hotel residency, as well as Burgundy Commons, which is obviously a residential neighborhood. The structures have been designed carefully to complement masonry, as I mentioned earlier. Page and Turnbull provided a analysis of the site and its compatibility with the historic building next door. In the staff report, there's a fairly extensive analysis about why they believe it to be very complementary. They determined that the proposed project will not destroy any historic materials, features, or spatial relationships. The size, scale, and proportion and massing of the proposed project at the RH Gallery is compatible with masonry. The applicant is proposing to use a plaster cladding option that was presented in the Page and Turnbull report. And one of the things that's most important about historic buildings is maintaining the differentiation between a new building and one that's been existing. So they've found that the plaster cladding option was a superior alternative. And at the time, RH was not sure what they were planning on proposing, but or what they were planning on doing. They had a couple of options, and they've chosen the option that is most sensitive to the historic masonry building. Going through the design standards that are in the design code, in the OTC zone district, new construction shall consist of multiple small buildings rather than one large building. No single building should exceed 2,500 square feet. The proposed project meets those standards. All 3 stories, okay, and the building height, 1-story buildings from the code are not to exceed 15 feet in plate height or an overall height of 20 feet. 2-story buildings shall not exceed 22 feet in plate height and an overall height of 30 feet. All 3 structures are 1-story buildings. However, they exceed the 20-foot height limitation to be considered 1-story with an overall height of 24 feet. If you can see up on the PowerPoint, I think one of the most important things when we were looking at the fact that this would require a design exception, which is allowable under the master development plan process. The masonry building is 25 feet in height, and then North Block on the other side is 22 feet in the area that is immediately adjacent to the RH site, and it has tower elements of up to 33 feet. The site slopes from north to south, and so there's actually, also a slope in there to be included in there in terms of the scale and the continuity between those 3 buildings. I think given that existing site conditions as well as the other 2 buildings, I think the 24 feet in height is justified because in scale, if it was a shorter building under 20 feet, it would look too low, in fact. So it complements the two buildings that are on either side of it. Let's see. Of course, again, as I said earlier, the master development plan process allows for exceptions. This is information, I think, and your opinions on the size of the building in terms of its heights would be important for you to discuss and pass on that information to the City Council in terms of your analysis. The floor area ratio is also defined in 17-08010 of the Municipal Code, and the maximum permitted FAR for commercial uses is 0.25. Again, the master development plan process allows for a lot of different things to be considered in terms of site design. The 0.25 would be met if those buildings were considered one story. Even though they are one story, under our code, the height requires it to be considered a two-story. The master development plan process allows for you to consider those and to exceed the FAR. Obviously, the FAR, if it's considered to be a two-story building, would be 0.5. And so we are asking you to discuss this issue and provide some direction as to your opinion to the town council. Staff feels that the overall massing, because of the site, the way the site is designed, the front of the building is almost completely transparent, and with some of the features in terms of the patio in the front, we feel that the FAR exception should be granted, and we've got some findings in the staff report that I think help you to focus your discussion. The Old Town Commercial District also requires a pedestrian-oriented design. I think given the patio, the small wall that allows for entrance and exit from the sidewalk onto the site gives that pedestrian-oriented design, and it's interesting and attractive. And so staff believes that that conforms with our requirements. General design standards for building materials. The project is in conformance with the design ordinance that require consistent use of materials and details on buildings. As discussed earlier, the proposed plaster finish option is the preferable one, and we are glad that RH has determined that they want to use that one. The site also needed to be analyzed for pedestrian access and conformance with the town's bicycle master plan. There will be a new 6-foot sidewalk that will be placed along the RH frontage by the applicant as part of their construction, and in terms of encouraging pedestrians, we have placed a condition of approval to put in a crosswalk at Padroni Street. The site and Washington Street in that area is adequate to support both bicycles and cars, and so again, we believe that this conforms with the requirements in this area. The zoning ordinance requires a minimum front setback for building of over 18 feet in height shall be 20 feet. Side and rear yard setbacks can be determined by the master development plan process, and exceptions to minimum setbacks may be granted. The applicant is requesting a 12-foot front setback from the building along Washington Street in order that it align with Masonry and with North Block. And if you take a look, the Masonry setback is, I think it's a little under 5 feet. It's very close to the road. And the North Block restaurant is approximately 18 feet. So this site actually will provide a good sight line between Masonry and North Block, and as such, staff believes that that exception should be granted. This is a common thing that has happened in that area. The Stewart Cellar project as well as Heston Tasting Room both received approval from the town council for front yard setbacks of 10 feet and 12 feet respectively. So they were smaller than what was required in the ordinance. Again, it meets, the site design meets the open space requirement of 20%. And the landscaping and fencing analysis, originally on the site plan that you have before you, the applicant was proposing a 6-foot fence around the entire site. Staff felt that that would create a closed-in feeling as the property abuts North Block property line, as well as the parking lot next to Masonry and Burgundy Commons. So we are suggesting that there be no fence placed along the North Block side of the property, and instead, if the applicant wants to provide more visual barrier between themselves and North Block, that they could do that with vegetation. And there, since the area immediately adjacent to the driveway is so narrow, it may be difficult for there to be a plant that can be put in there, any kind of a shrub. So we are allowing it as an option. We're suggesting as an option that it's some sort of a green fence with ivy that's crawling up could go in that area that is really narrow, if no suitable vegetation can be found to block that area. As this abuts a residential neighborhood, we have also suggested that a masonry block wall 8 feet in height be placed along the Burgundy Commons subdivision site. The applicant has provided a lighting plan that meets all of the town's requirements, with the exception of originally that in the parking lot they were proposing 12-foot high poles for the lights, and given that this is adjacent to both the hotel and the residential neighborhood, staff has requested, and the applicant has agreed to drop those to 10 feet in height from the 12 feet. You are also going to be considering a master sign plan for the project as part of the review. The design ordinance requires that the signage be oriented and scaled to the pedestrian. There are a total of 8 signs proposed for the site, 6 that are visible from the public right-of-way. They're all quite small. There is a 10-inch RH that's halo lit along the front of Building 1 with 2 stone plaques at the entrance that are 16 by 20 inches. There are also those same stone plaques on the plaster-finished pilasters along the driveway. Staff also analyzed the project's proposed trash and recycling plan. The trash enclosure on the North Block property is proposed to be modified to also accept the refuse and recycling from the RH site. In reviewing this plan, we also found that Masonry is currently using the RH site for collection of their refuse and recycling. And so what we are asking for as a condition of approval is that a refuse and recycling plan be provided to us. My concern is that the building is currently not oriented towards handling the refuse and recycling from all 3 businesses. So as a condition of approval, we asked them to prepare a plan that shows that there is adequate space and adequate design so that our private hauler can safely handle the material from all 3 sites. A parking and transportation circulation plan was prepared by W-Trans, and it's dated April 7th and included in the staff report. It showed that the project will generate approximately 158 trip ends per day, 6 in the peak hour and 14 during the PM peak hour. This generation of traffic is well below the threshold requiring a specific traffic study, and as the board is aware, we recently adopted a circulation element that shows that we are in really good shape circulation-wise here in the town of Yountville. We also asked that that analysis determine what the parking requirements were for the site. The analysis using the institution of transportation engineers showed that a total of 29 parking spaces would be required for the project, and under our ordinance, it's 27. So the applicant is proposing the construction of 30 parking spaces, 25 regular and compact, and a disabled access space, and then 4 tandem spots that will be in the back end of the parking lot, and I think it's shown on the site plan how they would be parked. As part of the W-Trans report, it included how that parking might work. And I think that given the time that we've had to review everything, staff is concerned that maybe it's not going to work quite the way the applicant or the engineer intended. And so we see that it's definitely feasible, but which cars pull in first and where the managers are, and what we're trying to do is make sure that we put in a tandem parking plan that really works. So that it actually is utilized by employees. And I know that this is one of the issues that the town has struggled with, and I think tandem parking is a really excellent way to deal with trying to get employees to park on the site so that they're not parking in the adjacent neighborhoods. And so we've included as a condition of approval that they produce a parking plan that meets all of our needs, and so we'll be looking at that a little bit further. But they've certainly shown that it's possible to do a plan that will work. We've had the fire department or CAL FIRE review the project plans, and we did not receive their comments until very late, and so I've included on the dais some conditions of approval that were recommended by the fire department that should also be included in the conditions of approval. The Old Town Commercial District does allow with a use permit, limited service restaurant, and for all the reasons that we've indicated before, we support that limited service restaurant. The customers predominantly order food and receive it from a walk-up counter, as is proposed by the applicant. The food is paid for at the time the food is ordered, and it's served in disposable containers or transported off-site. And the establishment must possess a Type 41 license. So the applicant meets all of the requirements to allow that use permit to be granted. There's a significant amount of impact fees that the applicant will be required to pay into. One of them is the Housing Impact Fund. That is approximately $178,000. There are other fees, water and sewer fees of about $67,000, traffic impact fees of $29,000, and other civic fees of approximately $32,000. So the total impact fees that would be paid by the applicant is $278,000. In conclusion, we believe that the proposed project is a very positive change in the North Washington Street neighborhood. Staff finds that the project has been well designed to consider all of the requirements of the building and zoning ordinance. The applicant is seeking several exceptions to the design ordinance, as I've discussed earlier. The exceptions are to the maximum overall height of a one-story building to 24 feet from 20, an exception for FAR as a result of the height of these one-story buildings, and an exception to the minimum front setback of 20 feet to allow a 12-foot setback. With that, the applicant has also, and I'm sure they'll mention, they've proposed a glass element to cover the courtyard between buildings 2 and 3, as the access for the public will mostly be from the rear parking lot. And I think they're interested in getting ZDRB feedback on whether or not you would support that same sort of glass element that they're proposing for the front patio. And then we are also asking you to look at the parking directional signage and give us some feedback on that. So with all of those things to think about, we would be happy to answer any questions, and then I think you'll hear from the applicant.
Thank you very much for all that information. Questions for staff? Commissioner James?
I do have a couple, but before we do, I think it's appropriate to disclose that I received a voicemail from Jordan Brown from the applicant. I regret I didn't have time to call it, but nevertheless, she left me a message offering to discuss the project with me.
Thank you.
Perhaps it's an appropriate time to ask other members if there are any other similar disclosures that should be made.
You both had discussions with?
No, I received a phone call. No
Okay.
discussion.
Did you have a discussion?
I had a discussion.
As well as did I over this project yesterday. And Commissioner Laz would like to make one announcement as well.
I went.
Your
I did
location,
receive a call as well, but I forgot to call back.
but your location as well.
And I reside, how close to where that property? Probably
Your
Pretty close.
address. Your address.
2161 Padroni Street, so,
But you're a renter,
but I rent the house, so.
so we're all okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Jane. So we will move towards the questions then.
Will the town require a recorded agreement between the owner of the North Block Hotel property and this project, not only for the parking, but for your proposed recycling and refuse plan between all three properties, so that these proposed agreements are codified and permanent?
Yes, the short answer to that question is yes. They
You can
already,
guess for an answer.
there is already an existing agreement between RH and the North Block Hotel. It will have to be amended to make sure that the Masonry, if they decide to continue to have the trash service over there, would be also included as allowed. So, yes.
In your presentation, Marlene, you spoke about finding all the site lighting compliant with the town ordinance, with the possible exception of lowering the light poles, the light standards as they approach Burgundy Commons. The ordinance has very specific foot candle metrics. So my question to you is, did you come to that conclusion based on a photometric study, or was it just an intuitive analysis of the proposed lighting?
It was an intuitive analysis at this point, and if you notice, the condition of approval is written that there'll be a more in-depth review at the time of building permits, and that's typically what we would do. Is, as with the tandem parking plan, a lot of the details are looked at the time that we're actually approving the project for construction, and so things that need to be slightly modified or tweaked would be done at that time.
Okay, I hear your answer. I'll disagree later.
Okay.
And
That's
has the Burgundy Commons Owners Association endorsed the idea of a gate and are prepared to allow someone else onto their property to construct it?
There may be some comments from the public or from the applicant about that. They've had some conversations. I've also spoken with the president of the Homeowners Association, and there's definitely not total agreement by all the owners as to whether they support this project or what their feelings are about this project. So I think maybe having a discussion after we see if there are any comments from the public about that. Obviously, it's a homeowners association, so whatever is done has to be done in accordance with what their rules are. The condition of approval that we've included in the staff report says that the gate would be constructed to the building and planning director's approval, and that would be done in consult with the Burgundy Commons Homeowners Association.
I have no other questions of staff now. Thank you, Marlene.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Cook?
Just one. Given the slope of the street, and I don't know how it happened, but the curb height in front of Masonry is way incorrect. Will that be avoided in this instance since we're building a new sidewalk?
Oh, in terms of making sure that it's the appropriate
Yeah, I don't know
elevation,
what
yes.
happened there,
They'll
but-
have to meet all of our town standards for construction, and yes.
Okay. That's my only concern.
Commissioner Laz, any questions? Commissioner Scoggins, any questions of staff?
Yes, just a little bit, if you could elaborate a little bit more on your concerns with the signage that's been proposed.
Okay. We have, yeah, we don't have that part of the plan in overhead, but it is it on one of yours?
The other one sheet is on 0.7, as well as the
We'll get there.
Well, this works, right? Yeah, okay. So this is the sign that I'm talking about. I don't know if you can see it on the screen. It has very large letters as RH, and then the parking is pretty small on the bottom, and my concern is whether or not that's going to be seen. So that one of the things we're having trouble with is that some of our visitors don't know where to park, and because we don't, this is going to be a building that's going to be frequented by a lot of our visitors. My concern is they might not know that there's parking back there if the parking lettering is so small, and so that's my concern.
Thank you. One other question regarding the gate, the proposed gate into Burgundy Commons. Is that an entry and exit gate, or is that just an exit gate?
It's an exit gate.
Okay. So, and I don't remember how the residents of Burgundy Commons get in. Do they enter that through that area now? Is that a one-way existing?
Oh, I understand.
I used to live there, so I can answer.
Help me out. Remind me
It's
of that.
egress only.
Okay.
Further south on Washington, there's ingress and egress to Burgundy Commons, but it's only accessible to the first 3 buildings.
Okay.
Then it becomes a one-way street.
Perfect. The parking spaces that are in between the 2 buildings, RH and the existing masonry, how would one access those for the business purposes?
Between,
I think there's parking spaces in between masonry and yep, yeah. So how would the gate would be further back, I guess, is what I'm hearing you.
oh, you're talking about the parking on Masonry?
Yeah, it wouldn't be on the gate wouldn't be on the street.
No, it's
Okay,
in the
perfect.
back. Yeah, it's in the
there you
back, beyond where the commercial uses
Perfect.
exist, yeah.
All right. That's all I have.
Thank you. I'm okay at the moment. Thank you. With that, we will open this to the applicant. If they'd like to come up and make their presentation.
Hi, I'm Jordan Brown, by the way.
Hi,
For those of
Jordan.
you. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me yesterday. I appreciate the time. Oh, that's right.
You might want to pull it up.
Apologies.
You can pull it up.
Okay. So who we are as a company. Restoration Hardware is a luxury brand and home furnishings and decor marketplace. We operate an integrated business that, with multiple channels of distribution, including galleries, which we call, instead of stores, we call them galleries, because they're more than stores, with multiple channels, including source books and websites. We serve as a curator of the finest home furnishings and historical design the world has to offer. Our collections of timeless, updated classics and authentic reproductions provide a unique point of view and unmatched combination of inspired design, high quality, and unparalleled value. Each season brings a wealth of new ideas, culled from our exclusive partnerships with the world's most renowned artisans, allowing us to showcase our unique products' passion and vision. Basically, we're more than just a home furnishings company. This is an example of a standard living room pad, which highlights all of our and a sampling, I should say, of our products and our offerings. In addition to furniture, we also offer case goods, lighting, and accessories, as well as art and antiques. These are all showcased within our galleries that we are launching nationwide. It's a revamp of our typical mall stores. It's no longer the mall store that you're probably familiar with, but rather instead an inspired gallery collection. The proposed project on Washington Street is thoughtfully integrated with the adjacent Masonry Napa Valley and neighboring North Block Hotel. Art Yountville is envisioned as a curated wine and design gallery featuring art, antiques, and distinctive home furnishings. The gallery will be comprised of 3 intimate structures constituting approximately 5,500 total square feet, with over 4,600 square feet of public green space. Highly site-sensitive, this first-of-its-kind lifestyle concept will blur the lines between residential and retail, indoors and outdoors, and celebrate both the creative past and present of Yountville's Old Town Commercial District. Designed in collaboration with Architectural Digest Top 100 Architects, Bakken, Gillum, and Kroger, RH Yountville will be amongst the latest in a series of original and inspiring new galleries the brand has unveiled in landmark locales across the country. And with me tonight is Gary Friedman, our CEO and chairman, as well as Jim Gillum, the chief architect, and Steve Sebastian, the SVP of Gallery Development. I'll speak on the rest of the presentation.
Good evening. I'm Jim Gillum, and I've got the pleasure and honor of working on a design for this site and doing it in a manner that is in concert with that beautiful stone building masonry. And being a historical building seems to be something that we're always aware of and we're always looking for and we respect in our projects. This is, I think, the 4th project that has centered around a historical building of landmark status that deserves complete preservation. And to that extent, it deserves to be recognized on its own accord. And the attempt to make an enclave, so to speak, or a grouping of buildings around it, I think, requires a new aesthetic that's complementary to it, but at the same time is different. So to that extent, we've picked up on the details of the masonry building to the extent that we recognize that it's, I'm going to pull this up. I feel more comfortable holding a board than a pointer. We're going to pick up on the gable ends and the manner in which this has been brought up to new standards with a standing seam roof and horizontal siding in the gable. So as a tool, the gable building has become part of our complex. The stone finish is actually something that we have avoided in lieu of doing Venetian plaster, which is a 5-coat plaster. It's a thicker plaster. It's very sturdy. It doesn't crack. Has a beautiful finish to it and very fine aggregate. So that is the main material of choice. The color will be a blend, which I think picks up the blend of the stone of masonry. That's the intent. And in terms of fieldstone of masonry, hopefully we're going to find a blend that we can use in a landscape way in this complex. So the base of the building will have a sill height of somewhere between 18 to 24 inches, which would be a windowsill height, and it would be an alignment that goes around the buildings and ties it all together, along with planting, and to that extent, it helps to tie the whole complex together. In addition to that, masonry employs decomposed granite in the paving, along with a bluestone, large bluestone slabs, 4 steps, which looks very nice. And so we're picking up on that, and we're pulling it as a device to help form a relationship between the new and the old. So it extends directly into this and also extends between building 1 and between building 2 and 3 to that extent across the courtyard. So that is, I think, the essence of what we're trying to do. These buildings are in the spirit of the old commercial zoning, 150 or 1,500 square feet, 30 by 50, 30 by 50, and 30 by 70 feet, the main building on the front. The idea of using glass as a canopy along Washington Street will be done in concert with using non-reflective glass and shaded glass. In addition to that, we may also have some sort of a device where we could hang the fabric underneath it if we need it for more shading, okay? The same device would happen between these buildings in the back where we have a glass-covered walkway. Rain would be led to each end and down leaders into cups at the bottom. And at the back, we would also be able to put fabric underneath that to help shade and cool that corridor between the buildings. The intent is that they not really be joined to look like one building, but they remain as two separate buildings, and the transparency and the light coming in through the street, so to speak, is very important. I think those are general comments. Then, in terms of the architecture of the interior, there are three buildings. The street front building, building number 1, is being treated a little bit differently than buildings 2 and 3. Buildings 2 and 3 are sisters, so their interior and the way in which we're actually spanning the ceiling is done in a different manner than in building 1, where we're using steel trusses. They're sort of hand fabricated with gusset plates and angles and fasteners rather than tube steel and welds. So that would be the look of building number 1. You're looking through this building towards the north. So at the north face, there's a recessed area for a culinary venue in the store. These are the side entries from Washington Street on the right through the building on axis between buildings 2 and 3. No, this is okay. This is fine. The idea of being pedestrian friendly and
So Commissioner Janes can see as well.
Sorry.
Okay, very good.
sorry about that.
That's all right, thank you.
I think the circulation is interesting because this, becomes the front door. You circulate directly through, straight on through between buildings 1 and 2 to the parking area. So it's very direct, it's very open. In addition to that, the openings on the east side, the west side are 16-foot openings that will be multi-fold doors. So the idea of transparency and openness is complete. And the same is true on buildings 2 and 3, 16-foot opening here, 16-foot opening here. So when everything's open, you'll be actually able to walk through these two buildings. In addition, there are entrances off this street between the two buildings into the interior of the buildings so that one can experience the whole lifestyle experience by looping through one building into another and back and through, and then there are shorter routes as well, but it's very open, very accessible to kind of the lifestyle experience. So this is a sketch of, well, that's building 1 over there. This is a sketch of what building 2 and building 3 would look like. And the intention here would be to use coupled rafters with steel details, steel rod, tie rods, and things like that. And you can see the cross axes with the corridor running between the two. So it's laid out and designed for these furniture pads or for, the lifestyle experience. This far as the street fabric, so to speak, and the context of the building with its neighbors, I think, that Marlene spoke very, very clearly about that, but I agree that we are trying to pick up a line for the roof that's in line with existing masonry, that the belt or the plate height of the walls is very, very close to what we have on masonry. And the intent for circulation is that it be all one level, or that the ramps be as minimal as possible, 1 in 20 slope, and very wheelchair accessible. And the idea of foliage, trees, planting along Washington Street would be another form of sort of tying the architecture and the landscape together with the base stonework. This is a view of the back courtyard with these big doors that I was alluding to, the 16-foot doors. They're steel with multiple panels that open, so this would be the experience of looking straight through at building number 2. This is within the entrance from the parking lot. Once you go through the back gates, you see this glass covered, it's not a skylight, it's actually a cover on the corridor in concert with growth of ivy or something like that on the walls. And then some sort of a rack on the top that would sustain growth. Okay? Oh, okay. Well, I think that's generally I've gone through that. I hope that you could hear me. But if you have other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions from the commissioners for Mr. Gillen?
I just have one.
Commissioner
The glass panels over the front of the building 1, are they clear or textured? I've heard a couple different comments.
I think it would be textured, and it would be fairly non-reflective, and it would have to be tinted as well on the bottom, I think, to keep the heat down.
So they would look darker?
Yeah.
Tinted window,
They look a little
tinted glass.
darker.
Okay.
Yeah. The idea is to make them dark enough to make it work, but not so dark that it doesn't take away from the transparency.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anything else? Thank you.
Around a little, but I hope that gave you a good insight into the building complex. Just a few further points on the building complex. This is in case you're wondering what it was, or if you had already seen the PowerPoint. This is an existing photo from one of our galleries, just to get a sense of the inspired layout, the typical courtyard detailing that we often do. The pilasters with the signage, which is also similar to what we're proposing here. The decomposed granite pathways, the axial nature of the complex, very clear visual connections. And again, this is actually an example of a photo from our recently launched new West Hollywood Gallery down on Melrose Avenue. The reason this photo is included in here is not necessarily for the nature of the entire interior conditions, but rather the example of these beautifully detailed steel and glass doors that fully open to the exterior, allow light to come in. It's the same scale as what we're proposing for Yountville. And again, you can see it here in this rendering. So the interior shots that Jim described, the central courtyard that he also described, which connects all three buildings. The beauty of this central courtyard is already also been explored in our old West Hollywood Gallery. This is from Beverly Boulevard. It actually has a very similar scale to what we're proposing in Yountville, so we know it works really fabulously. It has the same sort of olive grove feel with a character, especially at night, with the lights glowing within the trees and the decomposed granite and other similar materials that we're proposing. This is a view from masonry as well, looking into that courtyard space. with the fireplace at the end that will hopefully reference masonry with its stone material. So the basement back of house, as Jim mentioned, is really for back of house. It's currently just proposed for IT, mechanical, electrical, and storage needs, as well as our very limited preparation and receiving space for the food service in Building 1 on the first floor. As Marlene had mentioned before, tentative hours of gallery operation will be 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. per the town's recommendations of keeping the gallery open later to accommodate a later crowd. The gallery will be open year-round but closed on Christmas and Thanksgiving. The East Gallery will be open for a breakfast crowd. And the North and South galleries will open at 10 a.m. All will close at 9 p.m. as previously mentioned. In addition to the 2 to 3 food service employees that will be staffed in East Gallery, approximately 8 to 10 gallery leaders, designers, and sales associates will staff the complex during open hours in 8-hour shifts, which generally run between 6 a.m. and 2 p.m. and 2 p.m. and 10 p.m. I should say, in full disclosure, that we are still working on the operations plan for this complex, and as such, the parking plan is still under development. Currently, we are looking at the western half of the parking lot, as the town has encouraged, for employee parking, trying to utilize the 4 tandem spaces as well, trying to make sure that the relationship of this parking spaces is as seamless as possible. We don't want any traffic jams in our parking lot, certainly, so we're trying to look for ways in which we can utilize the shifts to best make the parking scheme as efficient as possible. As she mentioned, also 30 parking spaces, 4 of which are tandem. And also, just to reiterate, there is a 12-foot wide one-way driveway that's paved with permeable concrete paving that's proposed on the north side of the site, entering in off of Washington Street. Two-way egress from the parking lot will be located on the northern side of the property through the existing North Block Hotel parking lot. And also, as Marlene had mentioned, we are currently working on our executing our easement agreement between Hillstone and North Block Hotel. Everyone's on board and enthusiastic about the opportunity. We also are working with the North Block Hotel on the trash and recycling plan as well. The traffic study that was conducted by W-Trans, which calculated the average vehicle count per day using a furniture store land use type, which seems most applicable, based on our estimated employee count of 10 to 13 people and this land use type to determine customer traffic, the study calculated an average of 158 trip ends per day, including 6 trips during the AM peak hour and 14 during the PM peak hour. Food service and gallery support deliveries will occur between 6 and 8 a.m. before the opening, and will have a designated loading zone to use at that time. Larger deliveries, such as a complete re-merchandising of the store, will occur 1 to 2 times per year during a floor set change, which is what we call a re-merchandising of the store, and for a potential holiday collection. Garbage and recycling, as I mentioned, will be consolidated into the trash room, and we're working on that plan as well. For a relationship with masonry, each Staffridge property will be housed in their respective complexes. Both complexes will complement one another aesthetically, but will house different programs. The new gallery space will focus on art, antiques, home design, and self-service food sales, as defined by limited service at the town of Yountville. And masonry will maintain wine tastings and wine sales with a limited food offering consistent with its existing use permits. These are a few changes below. The 3 bullet points are a few changes, proposed changes to the existing masonry complex, which will be filed under a separate permit. So it's not to be considered necessarily for tonight, but just in anticipation of what's to come, so you understand the full vision for the project. Parking at the existing masonry lot will be reconfigured to allow for a pedestrian walkway across Burgundy Way to allow pedestrians to safely cross back and forth between complexes. Existing masonry landscaping across Washington Street will be redesigned to visually connect the property with the new complex to the north. And then we'll also be repaving Burgundy Way from the beginning of Masonry's easement, it ends on the western side just after the last residential building, to Washington Street. And the adjacent parking spaces will also be repaved with permeable concrete paving to further visually tie the two complexes together and discourage traffic onto Burgundy Way. As Marlene had mentioned, we intend to hold 6 special events per year that would extend beyond normal business hours with a maximum guest count per review by the fire marshal. We're not an events business and therefore would limit these events to our grand opening and special release parties, for an example. As discussed, our standard brand aesthetic for signage is discreet in nature. There are 4 types proposed for the new complex, and I know this is all, you've already seen this, I'll go quickly. The 6 carved stone plaques that will be located throughout the complex and will read RH Yountville, the Gallery in Napa Valley. These will be discreetly located on the 2 plasters flanking the entry drive, on flanking the eastern entry, the main front door on Washington Street, as well as flanking the western gate as upon entry from the parking lot into the complex. There is a metal halo-lit 10-inch pin-mounted RH logo that will be centered above the arched entry of the East Gallery's Washington Street facade. The directional parking signs, we defer to your thoughts on the size of the font on the parking signs. And the parking signage for each spot within the employee parking area will indicate designated use and hours applicable as well, pending, of course, the employee parking plan. These are just examples of what we've done in the past. This is actually from our Greenwich Gallery. I should say that the photo is overexposed, so the sign isn't quite as bright as the way it appears in this photo. It's actually quite beautifully illuminated and very faintly illuminated. Greenwich has a very stringent lighting policy, for exterior lighting policy as well, so this is not quite an example of the actual character of the sign. The carved stone plaque, however, photo is very accurate. It's carved stone out of limestone, and it's very similar to what we're proposing here. The parking signage is, of course, open for discussion. And as mentioned before, all transactions for the new gallery will be made from a discrete stationary point-of-sale cabinet or a sales associate's iPad. All cash and carry sales, including furnishings, decor, food and beverages, will be taxed locally. All sales shipped out of state will be taxed based on the customer's delivery destination. The price of merchandise will be discreetly displayed throughout the gallery on small gray price tags or 3x5 pricing plaques. Our objective is not to call attention to the sales price, but rather inform the client of a product information if they were to seek it out. So just to conclude, some pieces of RH in the news, kind of as a way of ending the presentation of just who we are as a company. We'd like to highlight some press pieces that speak to who we are as a brand and where we're going. The first piece is actually from 2011 and speaks to how we've rebranded ourselves since Gary's arrival at the company. The quote is, if Restoration Hardware conjures a quirky Silver Sage tone mall outpost filled with sturdy, inoffensive furniture and retro trinkets you were sure your father-in-law would just love, you're not alone. Friedman is trying to throw off the dead hand of the past. We changed everything, he says, and as we stroll through the company's newest store in San Francisco, actually a design gallery in the sense that some antiques aren't yet for sale, the company's shift slowly reveals itself. That was in 2011. We've since been able to really redefine where we're going as a company. This quote is the vision that Gary had from day one, and I feel very awkward talking about Gary when he's sitting right there. But he did. He had a vision for the company from day one. He said, we're going to travel the world, redo the entire assortment, build the core business, remodel every store, and relaunch with a new catalog, which we don't even call catalogs anymore. We call them source books for a reason. We're trying to recreate a residential experience. I think this quote actually, this is from our new West Hollywood store, but I think it really exemplifies what we're trying to pursue here in Yountville. We're trying to create a residential experience that blends retail and art. We include art installations to add a level of drama that inspires people to what might be possible. This is actually from the new Atlanta Gallery that just launched this past fall. Arch's new gallery here takes home furnishings retailing to a new level of merchandising, sophisticated presentation, and experiential shopping. And then to conclude, this is also about RH Atlanta, but I think it's very indicative of the entire feeling from what we're pursuing here as well. With RH Atlanta, the gallery at the estate in Buckhead, Restoration Hardware unwraps its latest evolution. Granted, this is a much larger store than what we're proposing here, but the feeling is the same. A 70,000 square foot retail palace that unfolds over 6 levels with furnishings arranged in intimate rooms. Light pours through French doors, a rooftop terrace boasts skyline views, gardens trickle with fountains. We want to blur the lines between residential and retail, says Chairman and CEO Gary Friedman. Why shouldn't a store feel like home? That's it. Thanks for your time.
Was there one other, Jordan? Or are we done? Was that complete?
That's it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Any questions that I need to call her back up for real quick?
Possibly, maybe you could just expand
Jordan,
on
do you mind
something
stepping
for
up once again, just for some answers?
You referenced a loading zone for food
Right, and
service
that's-
and for furniture?
For after hours
And
loading.
where would that be?
We left it to the discretion of the town where they think is possible. Ideally, it would probably be in the front few parking spaces as a designated area for before the gallery opens, but it would not be used, obviously, once the gallery's open, it would be used for client parking at that time.
But I assume, based on the narrowness of the entrance driveway, that those trucks would have to access through Hillstone's property?
Actually, they don't. We actually conducted a fire truck parking turning radius study, and a 24-foot fire truck fits comfortably through that driveway.
Through that driveway?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have the paperwork, too, if you need.
I believe you. What about when the pilasters are in place?
Still.
How far
I
is the
believe,
distance?
I have to confirm with Jim, I think, are they a foot off of the driveway on either side? Yes. I think so, yeah. So there's at least 14 feet of space. There's a 12-foot driveway, and then the pilasters start a foot off of that.
Okay. That's it for my questions.
I had one question, if you don't mind, Jeffrey, unless you were going to ask something.
No, please.
All right. I don't think I recall hearing much about the pedestrian traffic between Masonry and the entry point into the RH complex, if you will.
Would you mind? Thanks, then I can.
I've been to Masonry, great building, great property, but curious how that will work, how you're planning on tying wine tastings and or the anticipated amount of traffic that you really do see going from pedestrian traffic that is going back and forth through the walkway that you've proposed.
Well, there is, of course, the existing sidewalk, which one could certainly utilize to go back and forth between the complexes. There's also this very clearly demarked and wide, safe pedestrian crosswalk. Essentially, I mean, it's a really glamorous crosswalk, considering it utilizes the bluestone pavers that are currently existing on the Masonry property and continuing them through our central courtyard. But the pathway is wide enough; it's at least 8 feet wide. That will demarc the path of travel across the park, across Burgundy Way.
So,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, will you foresee a lot of pedestrians going back and forth? And the reason I'm asking ultimately is there a need for more signage there of some sort of walkway? You know,
Yeah, and of course
I
it
didn't
will
see
also
any-
be lit properly as well.
Okay,
Yeah, but
We certainly can include that. It's a good idea.
okay.
yeah.
That was my.
Again, some of those things are issues that we'll be working with when they submit an application on Masonry. It's not really part of this.
Okay, perfect. That was
Thank you
mine.
very much, Jordan.
Thanks.
All set. Thank you. So with the applicant being complete, is there anybody from the public that would like to come up and speak about this RH project at the moment? Please. When you come up, please let us know who you are.
My name's Felix Flynn. I am the property owner at 6712 Washington Street, southeast corner of Washington and Padroni Streets. We are diagonal, looking northwest from the proposed development, and we are directly across from Masonry. I had the pleasure of watching Masonry's development from the old B&B that used to be there. Have lived and owned there, that property for over 20 years. Have seen Frankie, Johnny, and Luigi's come and go, Per Gianti, Venica International, and more recently the entitlements, studied the entitlements for the Cunningham proposed development. Concerns are numerous. I think I probably speak not just for myself, but for many people in the neighborhood. The impact of the 24-foot construction, the view light easement to the street will be impacted. And the other thing, too, while looking at this elevation, I notice you lose the impact of the village appeal of the street. When my wife and I first bought this property and started sending our kids to Yountville Elementary 20 years ago, we liked, it had a very friendly, pedestrian-friendly neighborhood appeal to it. I'm afraid that the higher impact or the higher density will eliminate that in several ways, which I'll expound on. But most immediately, the contrast between Masonry, which I believe was built to existing footprint, and the new construction proposed completely blocks out or eliminates view easement coming this way. Full disclosure, real estate appraiser for 30 years. Sensitive to these things, too. So overall, what we're dealing with here is a property that's under the impact of the general, is Old Town Yountville, but it's the North Washington Street Commercial District, which not only has, as you're all, of course, very familiar with, certain zoning and design requirements, but also fits into Washington as a whole, or NOYO as we locals like to call it, and being more pedestrian-friendly rather than being more impactful. Now, I'm also going to demonstrate that the proposal for hours of 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. far exceed what's going on of the street right now, even with the proposed Stewart property. The impact of the garbage and refuse outside of these commercial properties is numerous. I'm constantly cleaning it up, and I've had issues with the town of Yountville, which I've resolved over the years about that. Cigarette butts, bottles, refuse, things like that. So we're leaving, I guess, the view roofline observation to the impact of overall noise and garbage and refuse. Leaving that, the other concern is electrical. When the North Block Hotel was developed, a huge power box was situated right next to my property, and I really had nothing to say about it, unfortunately, right outside my property line. Yountville, as we know, has frequent outages, and so I would like to see an electrical plan in place to address that and deal with that. The parking considerations are numerous. First of all, what I spoke in front of this very board 15 years ago on behalf of Philippe Gianti with regards to the signage required for the structure that was there before the Per Gianti, the remodel from Frankie, Johnny, and Luigi's. The concern was the neighborhood, the immediate neighborhood was being impacted by customers who, of course, had no idea that there was a parking lot behind. So I implore the board to consider a very obvious parking sign to direct people in back. Also, with consideration of parking, I think it's reasonable to conclude that there will be a number of limousines and type B and C vehicles, e.g. platypus tours, and vehicles like that going in and out of the property, bringing people to this attraction. So I wonder if that's included in the parking plan. I heard nothing of the sort addressed for that. And then as far as the impact of street cleanup, I'm wondering if the idea before I leave parking, the re-merchandising of the store was mentioned. And again, this being a new endeavor in Noyo, the idea of street front retail, which I can't remember ever having there. I would implore that the board require that access via Madison Street and not south on Washington Street take place. I don't know how Restoration Hardware does this. I don't know if they're box cabs. They mentioned a 24-foot clearance, so that's what I'm presuming. And I'm wondering, as far as the street cleanup, vis-a-vis the garbage I mentioned earlier that seems to collect on the street, if there could be more cooperative business. I noticed that there's sort of a synergy of business with masonry. I'm wondering if the special events could be limited to the premises at masonry as they have them now. They seem to work pretty well. Masonry seems to observe the hours right down to the minute, and there seems to be minimal impact from that. But again, people leaving things behind really historically has been an issue when the restaurants were there. And going back to another endeavor, Venica International, which sold on a wholesale basis unique architectural pieces. I think that's just about what I have to say. I'm basing this on the original intent of the Old Town element to keep the village appeal, therefore the contrast between the two structures, dropping the ceiling height so that the light can stream in. I know wherever I speak, I've stood on my balcony many times and just admired the beautiful view going north on Washington Street. And I think it would introduce a more urban element and defeat the purpose of what we're all really trying to achieve here. The noise is a consideration, the electrical, and then, yes, the parking, those three issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there anybody else in the audience who'd like to get up and speak about this project this evening? With that being said, we will close this to public comment then, and we will discuss amongst ourselves. So I want to remind the commission that we're here to consider a motion to recommend approval or denial specifically to the town council, and then with specific comments on height, setback, exemption of FAR, and anything else on that 60-point plus list you would like to discuss.
I'm ready.
Shall you? Commissioner Gaines will start then.
First, I'd like to attempt to address the neighbors' points. I trust that property is no longer being used as an adjunct to the masonry business. But in any event, Mr. Flynn, I think of your four main concerns: debris, noise, and parking. The best time to address that is at the use permit stage. We're really here just tonight to look at the design. We can't impose or deny any conditions that really relate to the operation of the business. I will say, though, with respect to electrical, I don't think we can impose any conditions on the design that would somehow compel the applicant to upgrade PG&E's utilities. The applicant will need to provide for its own connection to the power, but I don't think we can impose any condition on the applicant that requires them to address some systemic problem with PG&E. I do encourage you to return to the council and address the other concerns you have about operations of the use permit. With that, I think there's a tremendous amount to like about the design of the building. It'll be a great addition to the neighborhood. One small point: can we stop referring to Frankie and Johnny and Luigi as the first business and start remembering Mama Nina's? It was a much better restaurant than everything that followed, and that would make my grandmother happy as well as I am. So with all the positives, I'm going to try to address the issues that I think are most in contention. One, I have no objection to the parking signage at all throughout. I think a condition of approval should be required at the discretionary stage, Marlene, not a building permit requiring a photometric study for all of the exterior lighting, demonstrating compliance with the design ordinance metrics for foot candles at property lines. The ordinance requires bicycle parking be provided when a parking lot has more than 10 spaces. That needs to be incorporated into the project.
I think that's included as a condition of approval.
I didn't see it.
Sorry, it's in the
back
conditions
here.
of approval.
It's in the back.
Okay, thank you.
There's only 71 there, so.
Is it on the plan?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I've overlooked it. Shame on me.
It's right when it comes in. at the end of the driveway,
Okay,
at the beginning of the parking
I
space.
believe you.
Yeah.
Proposed condition of approval number 65 from the fire department, strike the phrase beginning with located and ending with entrance. It's going to be a terrible location for that cabinet.
And actually, I have to tell you, because we didn't get the conditions of approval until actually last night at 5 o'clock, I used some conditions from some previous projects, and we're probably going to be adjusting these before the council meeting anyway, so I think, I appreciate any input you can give me on those, because
My suggestion
the ones I got from the fire department were very, very minimal. They weren't so specific, and I think we need to be a little more specific, so.
So my recommendation on condition number 65 is strike from the word located through the end of the sentence, entrance. So the big issues, of course, are setback, FAR, and height. Those are really a three-legged stool. In fact, it's in Chapter 1824, it's really discussed specifically. Yountville's goal with its metrics of FAR and a permissive building envelope, which is what setbacks and building heights do, is to create heterogeneous buildings and building shapes. The exact example presented in the ordinance of where you have, say, a permissive FAR and a more restrictive building envelope is you get blocky buildings that are all similar to one another. I don't object to the reduced setback. I think it's in keeping with the neighborhood. That's one leg of the stool. I don't object to the increase in FAR, since it's really evolving from this issue of the interior height creating a second floor. I think it's reasonable to give ground on the FAR, but I don't think it's reasonable to approve an exception to the height. I think when we're kicking out all three legs of the stool, we're ending up, which is exactly what's shown in a policy document, three buildings that essentially are the same shape and are not sufficiently articulated. If that can be addressed, I would heartily encourage the council to approve the project, and that concludes my remarks.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Cook, would you like to go next?
Using Jason's three-legged stool, I find the same, I come to a little bit different conclusion. I don't see a problem with the height, given the buildings on each side and the cohesive look. And I understand, even though the setbacks are also within the range of the buildings next to it and across the street, I find the massing of this building at 70 feet so close to the sidewalk, and with the addition of the glassed-in tinted overhang, I find the setback is my problem with the event. To me, that's the biggest concern, along with the entrance to the parking structure, the driveway. I think the pilasters make it very restrictive looking, and with or without additional signage, I'm not sure people would feel comfortable saying, oh, quick, look, turn in here. And so I think my preference would be to eliminate those pilasters on a design preference and have much more significant signage. I think it's really wonderful that they're providing so much parking to the back and that they're using it for their employees, which is something I advocate whenever possible, instead of parking in neighborhoods. But I think it's really important to make the parking obvious to the people driving down the street. So those were my main concerns.
Thank you very much. Commissioner, Vice Chair Scoggins?
I tend to agree with Commissioner Cook on most of her comments. I would say that in terms of the signage, I think because it is kind of the venue is commingled, so to speak, with some residents in Burgundy Commons, that is, I think we got to be really careful with, making sure that patrons of RH and Masonry aren't confused and or can easily find access to the parking lots, especially given the north end entrance to the lot. I think that could be easily missed. So I think I would highly suggest that we increase the size of the sign and make it a little bit more obvious. I feel like the height and the setback I have a little bit of a problem with both, but, so I kind of agree with both of you. I feel like we have to figure out a, somewhat of a compromise in terms of the height. You know, if you're looking at the building, north block, it's 22, and then, and I believe that's a single-story building, if I'm not mistaken. You know, I feel just from a consistency standpoint, I think we need to try to be somewhere in that ballpark. But I also do appreciate the sightline perspective and the cohesiveness of the whole, all three buildings. I don't think we want it to be some mix mash of building heights and so forth. So I feel like if you guys can somewhat compromise on the height, and then on the setback, it does feel like 70 feet, linear feet on the curb there is a lot. So, you know, I don't have any specifics on the number of feet that we would set it back or the number of feet we would reduce the building by, but I just feel like that needs to be looked at further and try to come up with some sort of compromise. But overall, amazing project. I think it adds a ton of value to the north end of town where there's not been anything in that space for a long time. I happen to live in the north end of town, so I'm excited about the overall project, so very supportive of it in general.
Thank you. Commissioner Lass? No comment? No, I go last.
This will be a great addition to the town, especially in the northern part, considering what is there currently, which is just nothing and a little bit of an eyesore, I think, that we've had for quite a while. There were a couple things. The 8-foot wall, which I think was a nice gesture for the town, for Burgundy Commons next door. I had a question in terms of how far it goes forward, if the gate is going to be formed where basically the asphalt or where the driveway is, it right there?
It would
Is
go-
that where the
it would go-
8-foot wall ends?
Yeah, it would end at the location where the gate would come across.
Okay, so that's where the gate begins.
Cor-
That's where the gate will be? Because it looks like where that building is, there's no fence. You see what I'm saying? And it should
I
be
see
continued
what you
through,
mean,
I
yeah.
think. If the gesture is to give privacy to the Burgundy Commons, it should be continued, I
Yes.
think, all the way through. That was the only thing I had about that. The design of it, I think, is gorgeous. It reminds me of great buildings within Napa Valley. It does seem like a lot of building. Did you disagree? No.
I think he was.
It seems like maybe because it's been so vacant and empty, it just seems like it's massive. And what the gentleman said in the audience, when you do come in from the town and you're heading south, it'll be very imposing, I think. But the height, I guess, is within the height. I think it's a little high. I think the setback in the beginning, I don't have a problem with the setback, actually. But I do think the height might be a little too high. That's all.
Thank you. I do like your comments. Thank you. Just a couple of things. The walkway with the glass down the middle, if it's going to then add fabric, we should just add that out. I understand that was something that was just presented.
That's
So I
right.
just want to make sure that's clear for the council.
Right.
With moving forward, exactly what it's going to be. I don't have on our three-leg stool, I don't have an issue with the height nor the exception of the FAR, especially considering the FAR is taking into account a second story that we're going to tell them they can't add in addition to. My issue becomes the setback, and I sat on this commission and said yes to the modified setback for Stewart Cellars as well as for Heston. In Heston's situation, it's still set back enough that there's room to walk around and there's still mobility around the driveway. My concern is walking up and down Washington Street with masonry being 4.8 feet back. This property being 12 feet back, and then Redwood North Block being 18 feet back. If you walk that almost every day, which I usually do, people are going to be forced onto the road, and I don't think it's going to create that walking town that Yountville always likes to say we are. And then to add to that, if we propose, as the town apparently is, of putting a crosswalk on the corner of Washington to Padrone, I'm assuming it's going to be where the planters are at Jessup. And I think you're putting a square peg in a round hole, especially given our circulation element that we just discussed. You're forcing more people onto the street as they whip down from the south side of town going north. And there is one sign that there's no parking to the corner, but even as there was a subcompact car parked at that sign yesterday, you still can't fully see the corner till after you hit the front of the car. So I just ask that we don't put a sidewalk there. And I ask that we consider...
Not put a crosswalk?
Crosswalk, thank you.
Okay.
And then I ask that we consider that setback. As someone who also runs through this town, I'm constantly forced off on the street, which I'm fine with, but the car drivers aren't. And so it just becomes this competition. So that, and then we did, so if also you do that short sidewalk, all of a sudden you're coming up to the corner where they want to put a fence because they don't want the light shining from the cars of North Block Hotel in, which I understand the aesthetic, but you're also cutting the sight line because you are now forcing all of the people who drive out the back, who will, most of them probably, not all, but most of them will probably choose to take a right to come all the way back down to Washington Street, where we force people onto this 6-foot sidewalk, which is perfectly legal, but with this 12-foot setback, which has alleviated some of the sight line there. Those are my main concerns. So, with that being said, one last question, I apologize. Is takeaway food Starbucks or Chipotle? What are we talking about when we talk about the level of takeaway food? And I know this is a use permit thing, but I just wanted to get a clarification on that, because I think it does speak to whether people are staying there, whether they're coming in and out, and those types of things. So I just think that's a discussion, I just think that's a question to be had moving forward. Mm-hmm. So with all that being said, will someone consider a motion?
Kim, was your concern with the three items that we've most talked about? FAR setback, remind me, please.
Setback.
Shall I take a stab?
Please.
Before I make a motion, I'm confident we can rely upon Marlene and Nathan to capture a lot of the incidental things we've talked about, or that something one or two of us might have mentioned. I'm not going to try to roll that all into one motion, or we'll be here for half an hour. So I will move that we recommend the council approve this project with the conditions of approval as presented, with our reservations specifically for setback and height. There was a consensus from two people that setback was a concern, two people height was a concern, and a third massing. So again, the motion is we recommend the council approve this project as presented with its conditions of approval, with reservations that height and setbacks need to be better addressed and more consideration be given to massing.
I'll second that.
Any discussion on any of those points? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Passes unanimously, so this will move on to the...
I just want to make sure that, that I capture properly for the councils in terms of the signage and the central courtyard issues. Again, this was the first time I heard about the fabric. Do you guys have an opinion about whether there was a proposal whether to leave it open or to put that in? Is there a preference as to one or the other, given some of the issues about the tinting and the idea that
down the center
courtyard,
you're just talking about?
from the parking lot up to building 1? That was one thing that I'd like to get at least a little.
I have no
input.
objection to that.
Does anybody?
No.
So they
Not
can
the
answer
walkway
that?
covered, no.
Okay. And then in terms of the parking signage, I think I heard 2 people, but I wasn't sure if I heard more than 2.
I apologize. I meant
okay.
it was in my notes.
That's okay. That's all right.
I don't have an issue with it,
Okay.
but I will say this. The town council will have an issue with it.
Okay.
So they might be prepared to move forward with that. So,
Okay.
thank you, Marlene. Thank you for that clarification. Excellent. So with that being said, we will close that and move on to our next order of business. Any presentation and discussion from staff?
Let's see. Just to let you know that on your next meeting, which is May 14th, yeah, it's May 14th, right? Yeah, the 12th, yes, sorry. We will have the Glenbachie project on the agenda. It's the Yountville Crossroads. They've redesigned that project to more meet with the town requirements. And then the block remodel on Talent Lane that you heard, I think, at your meeting in February, yeah. They have redesigned that project to come into conformance with the FAR. That was the biggest issue. And so that will be before you. And then we're also attempting to complete our review for the JCB tasting salon, which is going to go into the old Cornerstone space at the Whistle Stop. So those are the 3 items that we're going to have on the agenda.
So he's planning design and review, not just use permit?
It's design and review, because they were planning on putting, they would like to put a small outdoor seating area.
Very good.
There's a master sign program and some other, those issues.
Very good. Any reports?
No?
I think that covered it.
That covers it.
Any motion to adjourn to our next meeting on May 12th?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. We are adjourned.
Put me down as very tentative for that meeting.